Between now and 1:30, the politics of dinosaurs. The Assembly's Education Chairman, Mervyn Storey, says he would like evolution banned in schools across Northern Ireland. Today, the newsletter in particular has the headline, MLA says teach biblical creation. The MLA in question is Mervyn Storey, who is also the chairman of the Assembly's Education Committee. Mr Storey of the DUP says he would like to see biblical creation taught in our schools, and his personal preference, he reveals, is that he would like to see an end to the teaching of evolution in our schools. He also disputes the conventional wisdom that the Giant's Causeway was formed 60 million years ago. Earlier this year he spoke to the Politics Show about whether his views should be taught as an alternative theory in Northern Irish schools.
Surely the purpose of education is to ensure that our children have all the relevant information in their hands.
But you talk about evidence. What is the evidence behind creationism? Because that's the problem scientists say they have. They say science is based on evidence, and where the evidence can't be backed up by proof, theories have to be abandoned. It's not dogma, and that's where creationism differs from science.
Well, where we take the position very clearly is that the evidence is being interpreted from the same database. So the rocks are the same whether you are a creationist or whether you are an evolutionist. So it is the interpretation of how these formations were made and how life became in the first place.
In 4004 BC. In fact, he even came up with a date, the 23rd of October, 4004 BC. Do you think he's right?
Are you aware of why he calculated that date?
He counted back all the genealogies in the Bible, added them all together and come up with a date.
So the genealogies and the dates in the Bible would suggest an age of approximately 6,000 years. He didn't sort of pin himself completely to that year or that date, but suggested that particular date because that would correspond with basically the beginning of the year, as stated in the Jewish manner. It's interesting that the evolutionist Stephan Gould actually commended Archbishop Ussher's scholarship on the matter, and because his work, if you've read his work, The Annals of the World, which Answers in Genesis can supply copies of, if you've read that particular work, you'll realise it's a work of great scholarship and something that that people in Northern Ireland should be well proud of.
Stephan Gould said it was great scholarship in the 17th century, but he wouldn't stand over it in the 21st century.
It's a question of what your presuppositions are going to be, isn't it, really? Whether you start from a presupposition of the Bible, and I'm happy to stand with Archbishop Ussher on that, and look at how the evidence is interpreted from that. So whether you want to start from a different presupposition, like Dawkins' presupposition, for example, is that God has nothing to do with anything. He has no proof for that. He admits he's no proof for that, actually, and in his book, The God Delusion, he admits on page 51 that he can't prove that there is no God, but that is basically his presupposition on the matter.
Do you think
everything is interpreted in that light?
Do you think, Paul, that the teaching of evolution could be a danger to children in schools?
I think in school classrooms people need to know different views. What I think is a danger if people are told that the theory of evolution is a definite fact, rather in the same way that gravity is a definite fact, because you can see that, you can demonstrate that experimentally here in the present. The point is that evolution is based on premises which are unproven and unprovable. At no point can you demonstrate to children in the laboratory how molecules, inorganic molecules, get together and form a complex cell and start to reproduce. In fact, actually, because the DNA in the molecules obeys all the laws of information, because it is highly complex information, we know that actually that can't possibly happen, because information never comes from nowhere. Any of the actual mutations, even beneficial mutations that you observe, actually occur by a reduction of information.
And I think Mervyn was right to raise the whole issue of what is taught in the classroom, because first of all, under European law, parents are entitled to have their children taught according to their convictions. And I think that sort of bears on the whole situation.
Well, surely it doesn't follow from that if parents happen to believe, for example, that the world is flat, that should be taught in schools.
Well, the thing is that parents have a right to have their children taught according to the convictions of their own beliefs. And we would say, you see, that there is scientific evidence which is consistent with the creation model, and it's not being shared with children. They're not having the opportunity think it through for themselves.
Well then, Philip, would you support Hindu parents having Hindu cosmology taught to their children in Northern Irish schools?
Well, I'm concentrating on this particular subject.
But their parents too.
I wanted to share just about what the attitude of a great scientist who I respected very much was. That was Professor Werner Wright, and the attitude which he took to his students.
But you can see that European law can't simply protect the rights of Christian parents. It has to protect the rights of all parents. So I'm asking you, in your interpretation of this.
Precisely, but here we are. We have a Christian culture and a Christian background to our civilization.
We have Hindu people living in Northern Ireland.
To do, doesn't it? Well, I was going to say that the Professor Werner Wright's attitude in teaching his students was that he would teach them the evidence which was consistent with evolution, and he would teach them the stuff which was difficult to reconcile with that model. And he would also, from time to time, go on to talk about his own personal view, but he would encourage them to come to a thought-out conclusion for themselves. And at the moment, our young people are not getting that opportunity.
Thank you for that, the Reverend Philip Campbell from the Congregational Union of Ireland.
Let's get one thing straight from the start. There's not a single shred of evidence to support the idea of creationism in any of its forms. There's compelling evidence to support the idea of evolution. For the chair of our education committee to say that he'd prefer evolution not to be taught in our schools is nothing short of a disgrace. This is the politics of the Dark Ages. It makes the people who believed in a flat earth appear enlightened. At least before the age of exploration, people had an excuse. To argue that the world and everything in it was created or even intelligently designed is pure nonsense, because it flies directly in the face of the facts. Let's detour for a moment to a place of sheer nightmare. It's called the Creation Museum, and you'll find it a short distance from Cincinnati International Airport, just over the border in the state of Kentucky. Its creator, if you'll pardon the pun, used to work in Hollywood until he saw the light and turned his talents to animatronic models designed to show us how the Earth was put together 6,000 years ago. There are dinosaurs here, but strangely, there are no mentions of dinosaurs in the Bible, unless you count behemoths, which could be twisted to mean anything. There's also an exhibit showing how Eve was created out of Adam's rib. The whole thing is completely barking, but funnily enough, I have no problem with it. If people want to damage their own children by taking them to a theme park whose director believes that poodles are degenerate mutants of dogs, that's up to them. What I do have a problem with is when these sorts of people are in positions where they're able to influence every child's education. It's estimated that around 40 schools in the UK teach creationism. For all the faults and crackpot theories they have in America, at least they have the Supreme Court to protect them. In 2005, a federal judge ordered schools in Georgia to remove stickers on science books which proclaimed that evolution was a theory, not a fact. Similar claims have been struck down in Kansas, Kentucky and Louisiana. One of the arguments of creationism is that nothing as complex as an eye could evolve in stages, but right this minute there are creatures on Earth with eyes in various stages of development. For this and other reasons, there's an increasing tendency to present the nonsense of creationism in different guises. The theory of young Earth creationism states that the world is less than 10,000 years old. Others, like gap creationism, progressive creationism and intelligent design, are all attempts to explain away the incontrovertible evidence of evolution. The fact that there are so many different theories are evidence that the whole argument is false and can't be defended against the scientific facts. But the chair of our education committee doesn't bother with any of that old nonsense. As far as he's concerned, the Giant's Causeway is 6,000 years old. This is a view put forward by James Ussher, the Archbishop of Armagh, in 1650. He had the excuse of living at a time when geology and archaeology were not as advanced as they are today. Mervyn Storey has no such excuse, and for that reason he should step down and leave the job to somebody more enlightened. This is not a dispute between the godly and the godless, between believers and atheists. It's a showdown between ignorance and education, and it's essentially the front line in the battle between freedom and fundamentalism.